So today we're going to work on multi-step problems in the real world, and our I can statement is I can analyze an equation with two variables, choose an independent and dependent variable, make a table, and construct a graph for the equation by plotting the points in the table. So we have today, we are working with variables, so we're going to have what's called an X and a Y. We're going to choose one of those to be the independent, meaning one of those variables will be our independent variable, and we'll learn what that means later. And one of those types of variables will be our what's called dependent. I'll learn about those later. We're going to be making a table and graphing. So that's where our X and Y variable come in. Remember when we use a coordinate grid, we're using graph paper. So when we plot, we have an X coordinate and we have that Y coordinate. Alright, so let's begin. Our first problem is Zin is buying beverages for a party that come in packs of 8. Let P be the number of packages Zin buys and T be the total number of beverages. The equation T equals 8P can be used to calculate the number of beverages when the number of packages is known. Determine the independent and dependent variables in this scenario. Then, make a table using number values of P less than 6. So we have a lot of information going on here. The first question is, we have this phrase highlighted in red, determine the independent and dependent variable. Our dependent variable changes based on something else happening. So let's look. We have two things happening here. We have P happening, which is when he purchases packages, and we have T happening, which is our total number of beverages. Well, let's think. What is happening with P and T? Which one changes the other? Well, when I buy a package, P, I'm purchasing something, that's going to change my total number of beverages. If I purchase one package, I would have 8. And let me just change the color. I would have 8 beverages. If I purchase 2 packages, then my total number is 16. So what's changing here is my T. My T is that total number of beverages. What doesn't change based on the other variable is that P. My P only changes when I do something, but it doesn't change when my other variable changes. I know it sounds confusing, but it'll be easier when we see our graph. So let's look at our next part. Now that we know what our dependent variable is, it's that beverages, and our independent is that packages. So let's check here. What we have next is we need to make a table using the number values of P less than 6. Well, here's my table, packages and beverages, and it's telling me my table is going to stop when P is less than 6. So I'm going 0 up through 5. Well, when I have 0 packages, I obviously will have 0 for my number of beverages. When I have 1 package, that means I have 8 beverages since they come in packages of 8. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I should have 8 beverages. My next one I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 when I have 1 package, and then it says I have 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So here's 1 package, here's 2 packages. That's 16. My next one, oh, I see a pattern. It's increasing by 8 each time. And guess what? I think if I look at that pattern, it should be 24. I also see when I put 3 into this equation, I get 3 times 8, which is 24, so I think that's correct. My next one, I'm going to follow that equation again. 4 times 8. How I got that is I put that 4 into that equation, and that would be 32. And then my last one would be 5 times 8. Again, putting in that equation, that should be 40. Now, let's check our answer doesn't match up. Well, look at that. 0 and 8 match, 16 and 16 match, 24, 24, 32, 32, 40 and 40. So this is my table when P is less than 6, when I buy less than 6 packages. Now let's take it a step further. I'm going to graph all of my points. Well, my first point is going to be 0, 0. So where would that be? That's going to be right down here. My next point is going to be 1, 8. So I'm going to go over 1 spot, and then I go up 8, and there's that 8 right there. My next one is 2, 16. 2 coming from here, 16 coming from there. My next one is 3, 24, and I'm starting to notice a pattern. 4, 32. It looks like it's going in a straight line. 5, 40. And do I graph this last one, 6, 48? I actually don't, since it was asking me to just stop at less than 6. I could though, and I very easily can tell that the next spot would be here. So here's a graph. Well, let's look at what were my independent and dependent variables again. If I go back and check, I notice my dependent variables is my beverages. My independent variable is my packages. And let's look where they appear on this graph. My independent variable is my x-axis. My dependent variable is my y-axis, those variables. That's how it's going to be in all of our problems. Your independent will always be that x-axis. Your dependent will always be that y-axis. So if you're stuck, you can always refer back to that. Okay, let's go on to our next problem. We're going to use the graph below to determine which variable is the independent variable and which is the dependent variable. Then we're going to state meaning we're going to write an equation. So we're going to state the relationship between the quantities represented by the variables. So let's look here. My dependent variable, well, I just remember from before that my dependent variable is, oops, my mistake. I labeled the wrong one. My dependent variable is my y-axis. My independent variable is going to be my x-axis. That means whenever I change my x number, I change it from 1 to 2 to 3, it's going to change my y number as well. So let's check. Do we label it correctly? Number of miles for dependent. Independent, number of hours. My equation, let's look at this. It says then state or write that equation. How did I get m equals 50 times h? Well, let's look at it. M, guess what? That is my y-axis as well. That m standing for miles. And this h, that h is my x-axis. That's actually how it's going to be in all this setup as well. Your y-axis, your independent variable, is always going to be what you're solving for. And then your x-axis is always going to be on the opposite side, most of the time with a coefficient or a number. So does this follow that format? Independent variable? Yes. Dependent variable? Yes. So now let's look at how they get that 50. Well, they got that 50 because that's how much it is increasing whenever your x number increases. When your x, let me rewrite it for us, m equals 50 times h. When your x increases by 1, how much did your y increase? Well, it increased by 50. When x increases by 1 again, so we go from 1 to 2, it also increased by 50, 100 minus 50. When x increased by another 1 from 2 to 3, your y increased by 50. So that is how we get that coefficient. How much does your y-axis increase when your x increases by 1? So I know it's confusing, it's a hard topic, so we're going to look at another one. Here's our next problem. Each week, Bianca earns $30. If she saves this money, create a table that shows the total amount of money Bianca has saved from week 1 through week 8. Next, create a graph that shows this relationship. Then write an equation that represents the relationship between the number of weeks that Bianca has saved her money, W, and the total amount of money in dollars she has saved, S. Then, name the independent and dependent variables. Write a sentence that shows this relationship. Again, we have a lot of information here. It's several parts. So we're going to break it down to the first part. We're going to work in this red. If Bianca saves this money, create a table that shows the total amount Bianca has saved from week 1 through week 8. Well, I know it's saying it's going to be 8 weeks, so it's going to be week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. How much does she save each week? Well, it says the first week she's saving 30. The next week she's going to save another 30. So what is 30 plus 30? That's 60. Next week she saves another 30. So I'm going to add 30 to that number. So that would be 90. Next week she saves another 30. So that's 120. And I'm going to keep on going till I get to my 8th week. So what does our table look like all completed? Well, it's going to look like this. We see we have week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then each time it increases by 30 based on this information right here. So our next step on the next slide is it says create a graph that shows this relationship. So let's go on to our next slide. Create a graph that shows this relationship. Then write an equation that represents the relationship between the number of weeks Bianca has saved her money and the total number of dollars she has saved, S. We don't need to worry about all that part yet because we're working on one part at a time. So my first thing is I need to figure out where do my numbers go? Do these numbers go on my X or do they go on my Y? Well, normally, not always, but normally we have, whenever we count by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that normally goes on our X-axis. So let's try that. We're going to try it and see if it works out. So my X-axis is going to be my number of weeks. My Y-axis will then be my total numbers saved. And now I'm going to plot my dots. The first week is going to be week 1 and 30. Oops. 1 comma 30. Next one is 2 comma 60. So I'm going to go over 2. 1, 2, and go up 60. 3 comma 90. 4 comma 120. 5 comma 150. Next one is 6 comma 180. Then 7 comma 100 or 210. And the last final dot is 8 comma 240. And look, I have that nice straight line again. So now I'm ready to move on to the next part. I didn't have any issues setting this up, so I think I'm on the right track. So my next part is, what is my dependent variable? Remember, dependent variable is your x-axis. Your dependent variable is your y-axis. Your independent variable is your x-axis. So I'm going to look, where's my y-axis? Well, my y is when I go up or down, so that's going to be my vertical. My x-axis is my horizontal when I go left and right. So let's check. Dependent, number of money, that matches what we have. Independent, number of weeks, matches what we have. My next part is my equation. This is the harder part. So let's think. Remember, it's always going to follow that format of y equals some number with an x. Almost always. And in 6th grade, it's always going to be that case. So you don't have to worry about anything more complicated. Well, what is my y-axis? Well, that is my s. Remember that s comes from that number saved equals some number, that box, and my x variable. What is that x variable? Well, that's my number of weeks. Again, they're telling me that variable in my problem. So all I need to figure out is what goes in that box. Well, how much does it increase by each time. It's increasing by 30 whenever I increase my x-axis. It's going by 30 up. 1 over, 30 up. 1 over, 30 up. So let's try 30 in there. And look, it matches. Now this last part, it's asking us to write a sentence that shows this relationship. Again, that's my very last part of my problem, so I need to make sure that I'm answering all parts of my problem. Write that sentence. So what is my sentence? I'm basically saying this in sentence form. It's the amount of the amount of money Bianca has saved increases by $30 for every week she saves her money. Let's look at our chart and see if that makes sense as well. The amount of money Bianca has saved increases by $30. So does it always increase by 30? Yeah, it always goes up by 30. And when does it go up by 30? Every week that she saves money. So it goes up by 30 every week. Is that true? Every week from 1 to 2 I went 1 week and then it increases by 30. Increased by 1 week, increased by 30. So it looks like our problem is correct. So I want you to try this now. I want you to try this problem. Zoe is collecting books to donate. She started with 3 books and collects 2 more each week. She is using the equation B equals 2W plus B, where B is the total number of books collected and W is the number of weeks she has been collecting books. Name the independent and dependent variables. Then create a graph to represent how many books Zoe has collected when W is 5 or less. So this is going to be a problem I want you to think about. There's going to be about 30 seconds between each, and then the next problem on this page you're actually going to solve on a scratch piece of paper and turn into the turn-in box. So here we go. Our first step is let's work on that table. Saying she starts with 3 books and she collects 2 more each week. Here's an equation. So I want you to think, how many books does she start with on week 1? Here's our table. She would start with 0 weeks, but she already has those 3 books. Then the second week, she's going to have 1 for week 1 and that 3. So 2 times 1 is 2 plus 3, that's that 5. Week number 2 comes along. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 3 is 7. So that's how I got this table, just following this pattern. This pattern is based off of this sentence. So now, how do I graph that? Well, I'm going to need a coordinate grid, and I'm just going to graph it. This is going to be my x-axis and my y. So it would be 0, 3, 1, 5, 2, 7. So think about, how would you graph that? Here's what it's going to look like. I have that 0, 3, that 1, 5 from here, that 2, 7 from here. Here I have 5, 13, which comes from here. So my last question is, name the independent and dependent variables. Which one is my independent? Which one is my dependent variable? X-axis is my independent. Y-axis is my dependent. Okay, I want you guys to try this one by yourself. It has some extra steps. It's asking you to write the equation yourself, write the sentence that describes it. I'm going to have you do this on the piece of paper that you brought with you. If you don't have a piece of paper, go grab one, put your name on it, put it in the turn-in box. When you have finished this problem, I want you to go to Socrative, and I want you to answer the questions on Socrative. Remember, on Socrative, your room number is Corbett 6. When you are done with Socrative, I want you to go on Khan Academy. Ian will help you get there on how you get started on it. So when you're done, go to Khan Academy. You're going to use the password and username that you see on our class website. If you're unsure, Ian will get you started. Alright, have fun. Good luck on this assignment and good luck on your Socrative.